What's up guys, it's Scott here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. Today I have a brand new modded Skyrim build to share with you guys, once again utilizing our very favorite mods on the market. This is the Insurgent. The Insurgent is a professional troublemaker. He has been sent to Skyrim with one task in mind: to cause chaos for the Empire, provoking instability and quickening the fall of the Imperials. The Insurgent is a member of the Renrijra Krin, a criminal organization of Khajiit mercenaries and terrorists. The name translates to the Mercenaries' Grin, or the Smiling Scum, and whilst the name was originally coined as an insult, they decided to adopt it, for it perfectly sums up what they are all about. The Krin are unpredictable, not abiding by any specific code and relishing two things above all: bravery and the enjoyment of life. Composed of thieves, thugs, pirates, and the like, they are exactly what the Thalmor need to destroy the Empire from within. The Insurgent embodies these traits and will use a variety of tactics to make life hell for the Imperials, whether it be fighting with the rebellion simply to thin out Empire ranks, or even selling skooma to productive citizens of the province, turning them to a life of bludgeoning and bad habits. If it negatively affects the Empire, the Insurgent is doing his job. The mods we will be using for this build are the following. We have the Imperious Races of Skyrim mod to increase racial diversity and give this Khajiit some unique characteristics. Then we have the Aurora Standing Stones of Skyrim mod to give us a fresh new Standing Stone effect. There's also the Alternate Start, which is a must for role-playing and avoiding the typical Helgen execution. Then there's the Ordinator Perk Overhaul, which, as says in the name, totally overhauls Skyrim's perk system, making for much more interesting builds. And finally, we've got the Immersive Armors mod for the Insurgent's eye-catching aesthetic. Don't forget that links to all of these mods, as well as timestamps for all of your video navigation needs, can be found just below in the description. But with that said, let's start things off with the Insurgent's race, Standing Stone, and stats. The Insurgent is a Khajiit. Firstly, thanks to the Imperious Races of Skyrim mod, that means he will have these start game stats. He'll have 90 health, 105 magicka, and 105 stamina. He'll have 0.5% health regeneration, 3.125% magicka regen, and 5.25% stamina regen. Then he'll have a starting carry weight of 300. Aside from these stats, the Khajiit race also offers a few bonus abilities. The first is called Feline Agility, and this allows the Insurgent to move 15% faster and sprint 40% faster at the cost of 15% more stamina per second. Combined with his perks that we'll get into soon, the Insurgent will move very fast indeed. His second ability is called Prowl, and with this, sneaking will be half as loud, and the Insurgent can perform a power leap with his weapons sheathed. The third base ability is called Rowlith Karj, making his claw power attacks much more powerful depending on his stamina. We won't be using unarmed at all though, so don't worry much about this. After acquiring 50,000 lifetime gold, the Insurgent will unlock one more ability, and this one is called Perception, and it allows him to dampen non-essential sounds and improve night vision at will. As for Standing Stones, use the Warrior. With the Aurora Standing Stone of Skyrim mod, we'll have two new abilities. The first is called Izmir's Scales. With it, the Insurgent will have 75% reduced incoming attack damage for a short period of time when entering combat. The second ability can be activated once per day, and it's called Star of the West. This will invert your current health, magicka, and stamina percentages. The Insurgent's stat spread will be 60% health and 40% stamina. The heavy investment in health will keep him alive in his light armor, although it hopefully will not need to be relied upon, as the Insurgent can dodge most attacks with his high movement speed. And thanks to this high movement speed and a variety of stamina preserving perks, 40% stamina investment should be more than enough. The Insurgent was born in Elsewhere, in an area bordering the Leyawen county of Cyrodiil. His family were nationalists. In fact, his father was a cell leader of the Renrijra Krin, a terrorist organization who are trying to reclaim their rightful lands stolen by the Empire, and more recently have been funded and fueled by the Aldmeri Dominion to destabilize imperial territories such as Leyawen. This was his father's mission, and as the Insurgent trained and grew as a person, so it became his. One of their key prerogatives was to destabilize the region of Leyawen, forcing the Empire to allocate more resources to it, spreading their armies thin. The Insurgent was commanded to meet with other Renrijra operatives in Cyrodiil to carry out specific operations in Leyawen. He would cross from Elsewhere and meet with them. When he arrived, he saw two who looked like vagabonds, or perhaps mercenaries, well dressed and fed, but scruffy looking nonetheless. The one who spoke to him introduced himself as Mazur. His ears were pierced with several bone hoops, hoops and his wispy mustache curled upwards, bouncing as he spoke. The other man was considerably larger and wore a heavy axe on his back. His name was Zalkir Blackeye. The insurgent suspected that that was because the fur around his left eye was black, while the rest of his coat was a dirty grey. These men were decorated members of the Renrijra Krin. They greeted and briefed the insurgent as they rode to Leeuwin. Ahead of them, just outside the walls of the southern city, a large farmstead sprawled out in front of them. There were several huge thatch huts, a pen full of horses, and a farm plot full of grain and vegetables. The insurgent looked on in wonder. There was so much gold in these crops. Even from this distance, he could see how well the vegetables were growing. They would fetch a lot of gold come harvest. Zalkir slapped him on the shoulder, pulling him from his trance, and then he handed the insurgent a bucket brimming with pitch. Chaos was the name of the game. Mazur had told him the plan. He'd also predicted the aftermath, claiming this would be a heavy blow to Leeuwin's economy. They made their way down into the field as the sun set. The amber glow of dusk was going to be dwarfed by their actions. They snuck through the field, pouring out their pitch. Mazur finished pouring his with a trail leading to a safe distance, and then with a click of his fingers, he produced a flame. In an instant, the pitch set alight. They watched as the fire crawled along the trail, and then with a great whoosh and a disturbance in the air, the whole field went up in flames. Without stopping to take in the sights, Zalkir ran to the pen and freed the horses, while Mazur set fire to the thatch farmstead. By the time the sun had disappeared and the moon rose in the east, the farm was gone, replaced by smouldering ashes. Before they had made their escape, Zalkir had pulled down his breeches and pissed on the remains of the vegetable crop. Mazur laughed as smoke sizzled and rose up in the wake of his stream. Later that night, they met with the Altmer representative, who delivered on the promise of gold. A few weeks later, they camped outside of Leeuwin, once again with a new job to fulfill. They had a supply of skooma to traffic into the city, and they were meeting with the buyer at midnight. Until then, they sat around a fire, sharing stories and drinking. Mazur loved to show off his magic when he drank, and the insurgent didn't mind. He found it fascinating. So after taking a deep swig of brandy, the insurgent called out to Mazur, before tossing the unstoppered bottle high into the air. Without a second thought, Mazur sprung to his feet in a majestic, almost comical pose and let loose a fireball from his palm. The ball of flame hit the bottle directly. The heat of the blast shattered it instantly, and the spirit inside erupted in a bright flash. After the stunt, the moon had reached its peak and the time for trade had come. They made their way to the city wall and waited patiently for their buyer. They heard footsteps approaching, and Mazur cleared his throat, readying his greeting voice. The figure who emerged was not their buyer. He wore a heavy cloak and a sword at his waist. Instinctively, the insurgent slammed the bottle of skooma he held over the guard's fortunately unprotected head, and the guard slumped to the ground instantly. They stood quietly for a moment before trying to suppress an anxious laugh. They wasted a small portion of the batch, but hey, it worked the charm. Soon the buyer arrived and no more skooma was wasted. They then made their way to the inn north of Leeuwin, in the same room as last time. The elven representative waited in what the insurgent now knew was the Thalmor garb. After receiving their payment, the representative handed the insurgent new orders validated by a seal of his father's. He proceeded to tell him about the instability of the northern province of Skyrim. The Empire's grasp was weakening by the minute, and the Thalmor intended to speed up the process of the Imperial descent. They wanted the Renrijra Krin to be present in Skyrim, causing chaos by any means possible. With his new orders, the insurgent would leave to continue the Renrijra's work in Skyrim. With the alternate start mod, the insurgent will arrive in Skyrim by boat. The boat docks in Windhelm, as in order to cause the most instability for the Empire, the Thalmor and the Krin decided that an agent in the Stormcloak Rebellion would be the ultimate start. Not really understanding the Stormcloak cause, but knowing his kind is not typically welcomed there, the insurgent will join up with the rebellion. This is only the beginning though. There are many other ways to cause havoc that don't involve the Stormcloaks, and the insurgent's primary motivation will simply be, how can I fuck up the Empire in Skyrim? You may have positive impact on Nord-control cities like Windhelm, while spurring unrest in places like Solitude. For example, he would do the Lighthouse quest you get from the dodgy Argonian in Solitude. Any quests that help anti-Imperial groups is great, and any pro-Eldmeri Dominion groups could use your support. When in Markarth, it would be wise to assist the Forsworn. The Thalmor fund his profession, and their interests align with the Renrijra Krin, so helping them is important. The insurgent is essentially a terrorist, causing causing as much political trouble for the Empire as possible. Another way he can cause unrest is by selling drugs like skooma. An unproductive, unhealthy society is a one-way ticket to a broken economy and a faster diminishing empire. As for factions, of course, the Civil War is a priority, although you don't necessarily need to finish the questline. There are many benefits to winning the war for the Stormcloaks, but alternatively, ensuring that the war drags on, wasting Empire troops and resources could be even more effective in achieving your end goal, a constant state of war with the Empire on the cusp of defeat at all times. The Dark Brotherhood is a great choice too. The Insurgent isn't particularly evil, but he will do what it takes to get the job done. If he has an opportunity to assassinate the Emperor of the Empire he is trying to take down, how can he say no? Your lack of stealth will certainly add to the challenge though. The main story and Dragonborn DLC are somewhat unrelated to your main goal, but the power of the Thorn can definitely help you make your mark on the province. Finally, follow the Dawnguard DLC questline, siding with the Dawnguard to eradicate the vampires from Skyrim. The vampires aren't particularly political, but they are hungry for power, and could prove a problem for the Thalmor further down the line. But now we have the Insurgent's backstory, role-playing, and factions. Let's see how that will affect his skills, spells, perks, and his overall playstyle. The main skills for this build will be one-handed, light armor, smithing, and speech. The Insurgent will not be using spells, although he will have certain useful powers like calling upon animals to help him, but we'll get into that more in the perks sections. Also, shouts like Animal Allegiance could be very useful in combat, but with that said, these are the essential perks you'll need to get your hands on. From the one-handed skill tree, take one-handed mastery 2 out of 2, Furious Strength, Overrun, Disciplined Fighter, Thundering Blow, Aftershock, Bleed Like a Lamb 3 out of 3, Mangled 2 out of 2, Shield Biter, Wolf's Tooth, Go for the Throat, Apex Predator, Bite Marks 3 out of 3, Savage 2 out of 2, Twin Fang, Swaying Cobra, Death Adder, Quelling Python, Wandering Warrior, Ravaged 2 out of 2, Man of War, and Unleash the Beast. There is a lot to get in the one-handed perk tree. Using dual attacks, the Insurgent has a strong focus on attacking quickly. With a combination of Thundering Blow and Aftershock, you can significantly increase your attack speed. If you perform a total of 8 standard one-handed attacks in combat, your next power attack will deal double damage and cost 0 stamina. Also, after the blow, attack speed is increased by 75% for 3 seconds. The branch starting with Bleed Like a Lamb will hugely impact your effectiveness with the War Axe 2, as this will be your right-hand weapon. It is important for damage output. Mangle allows your War Axe attacks to ignore 50% of armor. Shield Biter lets your power attack smash through a block, and Wolf's Tooth increases your attack damage by 15% for every sideways power attack you land for 30 seconds. Go for the Throat allows you to channel your stacked Wolf's Tooth effects into attacks for 50% bonus damage and 250% bonus critical damage. And with Apex Predator, each of your attacks will deal a bonus of 4% the target's current health. The branch starting with Bite Marks will boost your efficiency with the dagger in your left hand, and then perks like Ravage, Man of War, and Unleash the Beast strengthen your dual-wielding power. With all 3 branches combined, you can rake in benefits from all aspects of your one-handed playstyle. Renrijra Krin are a great many things, but knights in shining armor, they are not. The scoundrels fight with guerrilla tactics, performing small-scale sabotage and terror attacks to destabilize greater powers. And in order to be elusive and unpredictable, they don't lumber around in heavy armor. From the light armor skill tree, take light armor mastery 2 out of 2, light armor fit, keen senses, initiative 2 out of 2, Windrunner, fight or flight, survival instinct, and tempting fate. I mentioned that attack speed was important to the Insurgent, and in a similar fashion, so too is movement speed. Windrunner speeds up your overall movement speed by 10% while wearing all light armor, and survival instinct adds another 10% to this in combat for 6 seconds when you are struck by an unblocked attack. And finally, tempting fate gives you another 20% if you're not blocking during a foe's power attack. If it misses you, you get to keep that boost until combat ends, or you are struck by another power attack. The Insurgent doesn't intend to spend his hard-earned cash paying a professional to sharpen his blades. He'd rather learn and master the art himself. From the smithing skill tree, take smithing mastery 2 out of 2, Merrick smithing 1 out of 2 with contemporary Merrick, expert mything 1 out of 2 with hard steel, advanced workshop, recycle materials, sandstone sheath, smithing specialization into one-handed, and fuel the inferno. Finally, we have speech, and for the Insurgent's line of work, this is a must. Should he find himself in a sticky situation trafficking drugs, or maybe if he needs to lie to some politicians to get himself into some new circles, there is always a reason for a Renrijra Krin to have a sharp tongue. From the speech skill tree, go Speech Mastery 2 out of 2, Kinship Salesman, Speak with Animals, and lastly Gift of Kinnereth. As I mentioned before, there is a useful power available to the Insurgent that allows him to call upon animals to aid him. This comes in the form of Speak with Animals perk. With this perk you can activate animals to tame them. While tamed, they will follow you anywhere and fight with you until released. The other major perk here is the Gift of Kinnereth. With this, your wild companion is a lot more useful. Wolves gain 100% attack damage, spiders gain magic immunity, bears gain 150 points of health, chorus gain 300 points of armor, and saber cats gain 40% movement speed and move silently. With the combination of these two perks, you can truly use animal companions effectively, and depending on the place you find yourself in, there will usually be one of these beasts around waiting to be tamed. Put all that together and we have the following playstyle. The Insurgent will run into combat dishing out non-stop dual power attacks, receiving constant boosts to his movement speed, attack speed, stamina recovery, and damage output. Performing a dual power attack is quite an acrobatic skill, and the Insurgent will be able to fire them off at high speeds while simultaneously closing the distance with his enemies just as fast. He will also receive benefits to sprinting, forwards, and sideways power attacks, so he can easily adapt to a scenario using just his war axe when necessary. On top of this, if you feel like you need some backup, the Insurgent can call upon an animal companion to fight alongside him. If he needs a tank, he can find a bear. If he wants more attack speed, a saber cat would suffice. There are plenty of options depending on the situation. As for gear, the Insurgent will be full of swagger, wearing the Einherjar Brigandine Dark Cuirass, gauntlets, and boots. These are available courtesy of the Immersive Armors mod. His weapons will be a Nordic dagger in the left hand and a Nordic axe in the right. When dual wielding, the left hand determines attack speed, so a dagger is the perfect pick, while the right hand is just about added damage. Smith up all of his gear as much as possible, and I recommend drinking a fortified smithing potion beforehand if you can get your hands on one. The only other thing to keep in mind is that the Insurgent's task is about more than just killing. Carrying lots of drugs like skooma to sell in the cities is just as important as what you're packing. And there we have it, guys. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you're new to the channel and would like to see more, and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. This has been our latest modded build, the Insurgent, an agent of the Renrijra Krin. Don't forget the timestamps for video navigation can be found in the description below, along with links to our social media accounts. As always, thanks so much for watching. My name is Scott, and I look forward to nerding out with you again in the next one.